Okay, let me mute.
Okay, welcome to our New York Giants Preservation Society meeting for tonight, January 22nd, 2026, with John Mclaughlin. John's going to be talking about his title of his article, We Lost Them, but Still Had Them. Fans React to MLB Relocations, 1953 to 2025. And of course, we'll be talking about the Giants. John will also be discussing a future book. Hopefully, it'll be published that he's working on. Uh, no meeting next week. We're all going to be still shoveling out probably. But in 2 weeks, we have Ken Davidoff, who has a new book out on baseball. Not necessarily the Giants, but I think a book that will definitely interest you. A couple of things this week. At a request of Bill Klink, I got in touch with Jackie Brandt, and I think he's going to be a go to come on and speak to us at some point. Renee, we're going to use your method because he does not know how to use the computer. So he'll be dialing in. And I also called and spoke to Joey Amalfitano, and I wished him a happy birthday. His birthday, I think, is tomorrow. So the other men, I'll try to get in touch with Bill White and Al Worthington. And I sent a little package to Joe Marginari, who is in Pennsylvania. And that's going to do it. We're going to John is a member of our group, longtime member. I remember meeting John in probably, 2008, maybe, with Bill Kent's group.
Sounds
And
about right.
yeah, and I told John that when the group splintered, he better stay with us. So anyway, let's all welcome John Mclaughlin. John, floor is.
And the title comes from New York Giants Preservation Society member Steve Rothschild, who unfortunately can't be with us tonight. He's refereeing a middle school basketball game. But the title does come from a quote that he gave me when I was interviewing him about the topic. So the Giant fans are different, as I'm sure everybody in the room knows, than other fans. If you're in this group, you probably understand that anyway. But the Giants, both in New York and San Francisco, the fan reaction is different from what it was with other teams. Even when the team started back in the the late 1800s, they were New York's team. They were the celebrity team. They were the team of Broadway, and they had devoted followers, but also just the common person liked them too, and that stuck with them more so when the suburban flight started toward the tail end of their run in New York. The blue collar folks did stick with the Giants, which is kind of apparent in some of the quotes you'll see later on. And when they left for San Francisco, how did fans react compared to other franchises that relocated? This is going to look at the period between 1953 and 2025. So those are the last or the years of the relocation. I didn't go back any further than that because the original Milwaukee Brewers moving to St. Louis, I don't know if anybody's going to have any comments on that. And I can't talk to them because they're long dead. So we'll just stick with the what we're calling the modern era in this sense. I took quotes from newspapers and interviews as well as firsthand experiences that I've had when I've been to a couple of the games, which you'll see later on. The Giants I'm going to save for last, but we'll start with the Boston Braves going from Boston to Milwaukee for the 1953 season. The fans were blindsided. This happened about a month before the season began. So nobody had any idea this was coming. And the owner, Lou Perini, actually said that he was going to stick around in Boston for at least 2 more years. And then Milwaukee gave him a sweetheart deal and he left. And the fans were very blindsided by this. A quote from Jeanette O'Brien. She said, "They can't do that to me. That's my ball team. If they move the Braves out of Boston, they're a bunch of stinkers. I first became interested in baseball watching it on television, and I've been a Braves fan ever since." The use of the term of the vocabulary in this also is interesting to me because she uses a term like stinkers, which is obviously not a term that's used anymore. But when you get to the Oakland A's, there's a lot more colorful language that I will get to later on as well. You'll see the difference between that. Hy Kaplan's is another fan who was interviewed by the Boston Globe, And he blamed the fans for not attending games. He said he didn't blame the Braves for leaving. It's a shame the fans don't support a team like the Braves. It's not just losing the Braves, but the whole National League. So he was more concerned with the rest of the National League and seeing visiting players. The attendance at Braves games was not good toward the end, and that's one of the major factors as to why they left. Edward J. Modest also blamed Perini. He said this is a very fancy quote here. So I resist any slur or innuendo that Boston fans should feel ashamed. Rather, their refusal to buy nothing but the best indicates a rather intelligent and selective trait. No one promised Mr. Perini a profit or what have you when he bought the Braves. And like any other entrepreneurial value, he took calculated risks. I think they found the guy who spoke the best and interviewed him. That seems to be what happened with that one because that guy was far different than anybody else they spoke to, but still, he was very passionate about the Braves. Spencer Brown, he said that the team would be missed because they were making progress. I can't understand why they would want to move the Braves out of Boston when they seem to be picking up a good ball club. They've repeatedly said that they're getting new talent and younger players, and now when this is coming true, they're packing to leave. I think Boston fans want the Braves to stay here. And then Betty Harris, she was more to the point. She said it would be a shame for Boston to lose the pleasure of watching the Braves, and I'm sure their fans won't like it. So basically, they were disappointed and blindsided, is what happened with the Boston Braves fans reacting to their team moving. It's a different story when you get to St. Louis. When they moved to Baltimore for the start of the 1954 season, Bill Veeck. That's all I need to say about that. They hated Bill Veeck. He was the reason that the team left, and they did not care for him one bit. They hung him in effigy twice during the 1953 season, and once they threw the dummy onto the field after it was taken down by the police. They just did not care for Veeck, and others voiced it, including Vernon Parkhurst in the news. I think it was in the St. Louis Globe. The only dark page in St. Louis history was when that would-be sports shirt of a Bill Veeck came to St. Louis and in 2 years' time had transferred to Baltimore, St. Louis's oldest and best ball club, the St. Louis Browns. All right for some, I guess, but for myself, I'll never again darken the doors of Busch Stadium Sportsman's Park. An anonymous fan who only went by irate St. Louisian, I don't even know how to say it, concurred. Since the advent of Bill Veeck and Anheuser-Busch into St. Louis baseball, the great national pastime has hit an all-time low. Bill Veeck immediately sold out to a Baltimore syndicate in St. Louis. He said he always intended to keep the Browns and not sell out. Anheuser-Busch, Cardinals, phooey. Another example of colorful language from the time period that just has sort of fallen out of favor, but it does show that they were not happy. Uh, some fans did blame other fans for not going to the games, including John G. Vogel, who said, since the Browns' plan to move to Baltimore was announced last year, people have been demanding they remain in dear old St. Louis. Consequently, the season opens and all year long, the team lures a mere handful of spectators to watch them perform. We cannot expect any team owner to suffer extreme financial loss just to please the whims of a few half-interested fans when it is possible for him to prosper elsewhere. After all, I wonder how many of those who hung Mr. Veeck in effigy at the ballpark would even begin to stand loss in any one of their businesses if they could prosper in other pastures. So let's send the Browns off with a fond farewell and a wish for better years to come. After all, St. Louis, you had your chance. And then Mamie Gilbert, she chimed in. I hate to see them go. When I couldn't go to the games, I listened to the radio, but not enough fans went out to watch them play. And Herman E. Engel kind of even blamed himself. I've lived here, man and boy, 40 years and not been inside Sportsman's Park. How many others have done the same? I promise to mend my ways if you give me another chance. His chance would come with the Cardinals, not with the Browns. They were gone. Then it was the A's moving to Kansas City, and the general feeling here was apathy, which is surprising, considering how successful the A's had been in the early part of their existence in Philadelphia. But attendance was declining, they were losing money, and a move definitely seemed possible. Connie Mack was getting on in age, and there had been a family feud between Connie and his son Roy about what to do with the future of the team. Connie wanted it to stay in Philadelphia, whereas Roy felt that they could do better business-wise if they moved out. There was a Save the A's campaign that was championed by the mayor and the Philadelphia Inquirer. And Jack Hagney was one of the people involved in that as well. And he said, I'm a staunch A's rooter. I'd be willing to give close to that amount, 70 cents once a month for a booster's ticket. This ticket would not be good for an admission to the park. It would just be a contribution to help the team. I'd be glad to devote my free time to the athletics. So basically, he was buying a PSL, an early version of a PSL, for 70 cents a month, which in today's day and age is a fantastic value. But back then, not a lot of people signed up for that because that campaign disappeared from the newspapers in about a month. There was a fairly unique effort in the team relocation sagas. The only thing close to it that I could find was in Oakland by another group of A's fans 70 years later. For the most part, fans just accepted the team would leave. George T. Mesner wanted fans to turn up for the Phillies, so they would also not leave. But all baseball fans turn out at all home games for the coming 1955 season, for what happened to the A's must never happen to the Phillies. Then they had a welcome home rally for the Phillies before the 1955 season. And a lone unidentified fan, and again, this may or may not have happened because the newspaper did not identify the fan. But when the welcome home Phillies rally wrapped up, one person reportedly yelled, "Save the A's." Another fan named David Bishop, who had been to every A's home opener since 1902, went to Kansas City for their first game of 1955 as the Kansas City A's. And he said after going to the first game, "This is really something. Imagine traveling about 1,500 miles to see a baseball game. I wouldn't mind seeing the A's knock over Detroit again tomorrow." So he did actually go back for the second game. I saw a follow-up article on that. The dedication of those two fans notwithstanding, apathy was definitely the general tone when the team left for Kansas City. There was not a lot of movement to keep the team. And when they left, it was just sort of everybody kind of saw the handwriting on the wall. This one may touch some sore spots here, but the Brooklyn Dodgers, we're up to that point for the 1958 campaign. I'll take a moment so you can get your epithets out of the way and everything of that nature. Uh, Dodger fans were angry. They were angry at the whole process, and fans were fed up not only with O'Malley, but with Robert Moses. They were just fed up with hearing about it, basically. The New York Times, after the move, they conducted some interviews, and fans were just tired of the constant fighting over a new stadium. O'Malley and Moses had been going back and forth for years, and it wasn't going anywhere. Irving Blank laid the blame at O'Malley's feet at the time. He said, "I'm mad at the Dodgers, or maybe I should say I'm mad at Walter O'Malley. He had a good offer from Bob Moses for a park in the Flushing Meadows." And fans rooted for the Brooklyn Dodgers and no one else. Anthony S. Morella said, "Brooklyn is my town, not Los Angeles. I'm not rooting for any out of town bums. That's what the Brooklyn bums are for deserting the loyal town that made them so rich." Chico Muentes, he said, "Money means more to them than their New York fans do. Why should I root for them? Let them go." And it didn't really dissipate with Dodger fans. They basically gave up on baseball, or a lot of them gave up on baseball until the Mets came back in 1962. And it, in a weird roundabout way, it actually kind of impacted another team too, the White Sox, because Jerry Reinsdorf grew up a Dodger fan. And I asked him when I interviewed him if he was ever serious about moving to Tampa, knowing that he was a Dodger fan. And he said no, he was never going to move the White Sox unless the stadium fell down. He was just using it as leverage. He didn't want another fan base to go through what he had gone through with the Dodgers. I'm skipping the Giants. You do have them at the end, so we'll save the best for last. But now we'll just go to the Washington Senators, the first one, moving to Minnesota in 1961. This is another one where fans were just tired of the constant talk about not necessarily a new stadium, but relocation. Clark Griffith every year was chiming in about how he would move the team, or he was considering offers from Minneapolis, and Dallas was mentioned as well. But he was perceived as very cheap. So when rumors of a move to Minneapolis first popped up, or popped up again, I should say, in 1958, one unnamed fan took a cheap shot at the cheap perception, saying the way this club operates, it simply has to go to Minneapolis. When they go to Minneapolis, they'll simply turn those W's upside down and they'll have it made. Think of the money they'll save. More fans in 1958 also were mad at him at a game in September when they held up a sign that simply said, "Get out, Griff." A later incarnation of the Senators would have other fans holding up other signs at a different owner. So the trend continues in Washington, and we'll see that shortly. And then in 1959, when the rumors began again, talk of a new Continental League popped up with another team coming to DC. And that encouraged F. Michael Sullivan. He said, "I'll definitely be glad to see Griffith go. If we get a Continental League team, it will be the beginning of a new era in sports here. We might even win the pennant." Well, they didn't get the Continental League because that never came to be. And they never won the pennant because they're the Senators. James Cohey also said, "I hope the Senators do go. It wouldn't take long for another team to come in here. They just really were tired of Clark Griffith and his constant talk of relocation." The Continental League, it failed, like I said, but a lot of the teams that were rumored to be going into the Continental League eventually did get franchises. I believe the only one that never got a team was Buffalo, but all of the other Dallas and Toronto, a lot of those cities ultimately did get teams, and Washington did get a team, but there was a compromise made. They basically let the original Senators move to Minneapolis. They gave them an immediate expansion team to keep the Continental League from coming in. Bobby Cohen was a fan, and she said, I cried when I first heard the news of the move, but it's not so bad. We'll have another team. Maybe now we'll even have a pennant someday. That wishful thinking continued through the second Senators as well, but again, a pennant never materialized for those teams. For a request from another presentation I did, the Los Angeles Angels moving to Anaheim for the 1966 season. Now, generally, there was nobody cared about the Angels. I hate to be blunt about it, but it's true. There were a lot of 2-for-1 ticket offers in the newspapers. Very few quotes from fans from when the move was announced in August of 1964 to when they played their final game, a doubleheader in September of 1965 against the Red Sox. I didn't see one quote from a fan. There was no mass outcry. Nobody stormed the field. And there was only about 3,500 people at the final doubleheader when they played at Chavez Ravine. That's what they called Dodger Stadium when they played there. They were pretty bad, mostly, except for when they finished third in 1962. And that was their best year attendance-wise. They didn't have their own identity, and they played at Dodger Stadium, and it hurt them at the box office. So while I couldn't find too much in the way of quotes from fans, one reporter who was Arch Seidenbaum, he was of the Los Angeles Times, he said he was a fan and he was doubly sorry to see them go because they were born here, unlike the Dodgers, who arrived like the rest of us carpetbaggers to put our mouths where the money is. And then people on the team were actually less apprehensive about leaving. They were pretty good, happy to get out of there, actually. Jim Fregosi was glad to see them leave for Anaheim and get out of Dodger Stadium, saying, the important thing is that having our own park with our own fans will mean a great deal for team pride. There won't be 10,000 people in the stands listening to the Dodgers. And Bill Rickney also echoed those sentiments. He was the manager at the time. Hell, we were never sure if we were playing for our own fans or Dodger fans. So there was not a lot of people sad to see the Angels go when they did, just because they didn't seem to have a lot of fans to begin with. Then we get to the Milwaukee Braves moving to Atlanta. So this is the first team we're seeing moving for the second time on this list. And the fans in Milwaukee, they were not happy. They felt they had been strung along. They felt that they had given the team support, saw them through the highs of winning world championships, and now when they had slipped back to mediocrity, the team was looking for greener pastures. And Donald Soule kind of echoed this. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing his name right, but it's Soehle. I believe it's pronounced Soul, could be solely. But either way, he said after 10 years, interest in attendance is bound to fall off, some, especially with the mediocre showing of the team in the last few years. Right away, the rumor is moved to another city. The Braves brass won't confirm or deny this rumor. This is how the team regards the city and the state. Milwaukee was the talk of the nation attendance-wise only a few years ago. Let's face the facts. Money talks. And then besides the slip and play, some other people listed other reasons for the attendance decline, including the cost of attending games. James C. Runn said, both farmers and small town businessmen used to make up a great part of the Braves' attendance. Those people can no longer afford to attend the games. And then they, like I said, they felt betrayed and left to pick up the tab for the building of Milwaukee County Stadium, which they were still on the hook for tax purpose wise. And there was no Save the A's campaign or a similar campaign to the Save the A's in Philadelphia. In fact, it was a boycott, and it was organized by Joseph Ober, who said, we feel like our city is being raped. We don't see any sense in lining their pockets and leaving us with a $10 million liability. That's how much was left on the stadium after the Braves left. It was $10 million, which back then is a significant amount of money. The betrayal was also noted by Jack Klein on the last day of the home game, and he actually put it fairly well. To me, the Braves is like romancing a girl all year long, and then someone else marries her. Who needs it? There was no one person who got their wrath, though, because it was an ownership consortium by this point in time, but they were very angry about the move. Kansas City, the A's, moving to Oakland for 1968. And much like the situation in St. Louis with Bill Veeck, one man felt the wrath of the fans, and that was Charles Finley, notorious baseball kook, I guess, for lack of a better term, with the orange baseballs and the mule. He's a character. But he was threatening to relocate the team as soon as 1961. And that was because that's actually right after he took ownership. And the city did not allow his plan for post game fireworks. That's really what set him off. They wouldn't let it do it because of complaints from neighbors. And he threatened to move the team to some other place that would allow him to do his post game fireworks. W. Humphrey was a fan who was not happy about this, and he resented an outsider like Finley threatening to take the team away. No real fan wants to lose the A's, but by the same token, no loyal Kansas Cityan wants to be dictated by someone from out of state who couldn't care less about the city's welfare. After years, it just went on for years. Every year, this guy was talking about moving, similar to the situations in Washington and to a lesser extent in St. Louis with the Browns. But fans were fed up and they were tired of the rumors and even more tired of Finley. Walter E. Zune, he expressed this in the newspaper. Mr. Finley should not be permitted to move the franchise of his own accord. But the fans and officials of Kansas City should do this for Mr. Finley. They should pack all his belongings, all his clown suits, all his firecrackers, all his bush leaguers, and his good man Friday and Mr. Finley in a boxcar and send them off to Dallas or Oakland or Atlanta or any other place. And then in 1964, the rumors of a move to Oakland, they angered Ed Lane Jr., who said Charles O. Finley has used the fans and players to get what he wanted, Oakland. He also exploited Seattle area people to hide his real intentions. He will continue to use people in situations to get his way, be it good or bad for baseball. And then when the team finally moved, most were glad to be rid of Finley and knew they would get another team in a few years. Mary Weeks summed it up. I don't want to lose the team. 1969 is a long time to wait. I love baseball. I wish we could keep the A's and get rid of Finley. They might do better without him. And the Royals actually, there was a senator in the Missouri State Legislature who was very upset with the move of the A's to Oakland and felt that Kansas City had been robbed. And he kind of forced baseball's hand into giving them an expansion team, which became the Royals. And because the Royals were fast tracked, the Seattle Pilots had to be fast tracked, and that didn't go as well. We'll get to them right now. They moved to Milwaukee for one season. It was not good. The stadium was still being built as fans were coming into the game. They were hammering in the sections of the bleachers. The bathrooms never worked properly at Six Stadium. There were constant issues with plumbing backups if too many people were at a game, which generally was not a problem because they weren't very good. But it was a mess. There was all sorts of problems. The city dragged its feet on construction. There was a strike of the construction workers. All of this sort of just delayed them even getting the stadium up to suitable MLB standards. But the Pilots, they ran out of money, is essentially, long story short, what happened. And they moved to Milwaukee during spring training before the 1970 season. So like the Braves, right before the season started, I have a ticket in my house. I don't have it with me now. I'm at work. But it's a Seattle Pilots 1970 ticket. And it's just such an oddity that I felt I had to get it because they just didn't exist and they didn't have time to get rid of those tickets, I guess. But fans were angry. And like they did in St. Louis, they hung the team owners in effigy. So Max and Dewey Soriano were the owners. They were a pair of brothers, and they were hung in effigy at a mall near the entrance to a monorail station and in a park. And it is similar to St. Louis and later Washington, which we will also see in a few moments. Mike Altander called for escalation, like the fans on the field the day the Giants left, actually. He said, they hung them in effigy. Now maybe we should hang them, period. Now that ties to the chant of hang Stoneham, or which I will show you when we get to that section of the Giants. But there were fans of the Giants on the day who were very angry and wanted Horace Stoneham hung. And Mike Altander here called for the Soriano brothers to be actually hung instead of hung in effigy. So he was a little angry. One unnamed fan, again, a lot of unnamed fans quoted in these articles for some reason, like those in Kansas City and Washington. They trusted they would get another team when and not if, saying maybe next time there will be a little better planning before a big league team is brought here. And the Mariners did arrive in 1977, and it did help ease the loss for some fans. But there are definitely some Pilots, if you want to check it out on YouTube. And there is a fan club that still meets, and they just honor their memories of the Pilots. And that ties into the fact that there's a lot of lament over what could have been after the initial anger faded. Dwayne Keys, he was 15 at the time, and he highlighted the loss of innocence that he felt, saying it was like learning about Santa Claus. Seattle Pilot historian Mike Fuller, he also said, I was devastated when I found out the team was leaving because I never got a chance to go to a game with my dad. It was one of those, we'll do it next year type of things, and there was no next year. Over time, the Sorianos, like Walter O'Malley, became less vilified than they initially had been, and kind of like the Expos and the Brooklyn Dodgers have also been romanticized to a degree, with their fleeting existence leaving fans wondering what could have been. Baseball returned to the nation's capital, and that was in 1961, but it didn't last very long because the second Washington Senators moved to Texas for the 1972 season. Bob Short. He is like Charles Finley or Bill Veeck. He is the one who took the ire of the fan base. And again, much like Finley, he was talking about moving the team almost as soon as he took over in 1968. He was blunt and said that if attendance didn't improve, he would move the team. And it angered fans. W. Sherwood Beavers, he was quoted in the Washington Post, and he said he was looking forward to be rid of Short after the 1970 season. To allay our fears at the very beginning, he threatens to move our team unless we support it up to his expectations. Then, to entice us, the fans, to support the team, he raises the prices. If Mr. Short really wants to move from Washington, from myself and other fans in the area, Mr. Short, be gone and good riddance. And the anger did not subside after the move was officially announced in 1971. George Lacey showed fan frustration, saying, I didn't want the team to move, but it may be worth it to get rid of Short. They wanted him out. They were willing to sacrifice the team to get rid of Bob Short. And those sentiments continued into the last game. The last game was contentious, to say the least. There were banners hanging from the stands, one from the upper deck that said Short stinks. And they would have said sucks, except that was not socially acceptable at the time. So they went with Short stinks. And that kind of became the rallying cry. And there are some fans who are still of a certain age who probably remember that. And if you say Short stinks to them, they will agree with you. The banners were quickly seized by the police, but there was another fan who was interviewed during the game, Joe Freeze, and he was blunt in why he was there. I came out to boo Bob Short. He's an ass. Fans did storm the field in the ninth inning. The Senators were 1 out away from winning the game, and the fans stormed the field. The umpires had to give the game as a forfeit to the Yankees because they couldn't get the fans under control. They were just ripping up the field, taking the bases, everything you could think of. So their last game ended in a debacle. And then when the Rangers, where the Senators moved to, they came back to Baltimore to play the Orioles in 1972. Fans were harassing Short because he was sitting in a box in the stands, and they brought a dummy. And it wasn't hung, so that was at least some bit of good news. But they brought a dummy stuffed to look like him, and there's pictures of people with the dummy next to him and sort of just harassing him with it in his section. And another sign that said "Short stinks" was stuck on the back of it, and then other banners that fans held up said "Short still stinks" and "Tech Short is full of bull." Like Finley, fans were all too glad to be rid of Bob Short, but definitely for different reasons. And they were glad to be rid of Calvin Griffith 11 years earlier. So the cheapness of Calvin Griffith they were mad about, and then just the overall tenor of Bob Short's reign. They were glad to be rid of both owners, but ultimately it let them to be without baseball for another 32 years until the Expos moved back later on, which is where we are now. And so the Expos moving to Washington. Again, the Expos are another franchise that is sort of romanticized in hindsight. But there was a constant struggle to get a ballpark built there. They had no English language television. They had no English language radio. They had no French language TV. They only had French language radio at one point in time. So the advertising dollars weren't coming in. Attendance was not good. There were times when opening day, they would draw 38,000 people. And then the next day, not like the season has gotten away from them at any point in time, but they'd be drawing 14,000. So I don't know where the rest of the fans went, but they only seem to come for big events and things like that. And then, of course, the players' strike happened in 1994, and that really kept a lot more people from coming out. And it also handcuffed them in terms of signing free agents because they had to tighten the budget. There was a lot of problems there. Getting a new stadium may have fixed it, but the interest from the fans is also questionable at best. There had been contraction and relocation rumors for a while, but when the final day came, the reactions were mixed. I was there at the last game the Expos played in Montreal, and I was trying to order something from the menu, and it was in French. And the boy, about 15, he helped me out. He was really nice, and he helped me order. I started talking to him, and he said him and his friends would go to the games after school. I asked him what they would do now that the Expos were gone. He said, find somewhere else to go, I guess. Pretty honest assessment. I respected that. And the third inning fans definitely they threw objects onto the field. There were some golf balls. The mascot got up and tried to plead for people to not do it, but I think fans took Yuppie doing that as an incitement to do it more. So they threw more stuff on the field, and it nearly ended in a forfeit. I think it was close, but they eventually restored order, and the fans stopped throwing things onto the field. Kathleen Brimecombe, she was interviewed during the game, and she said that she was sick of being lied to by people who've run the team. The reason I've never put a name on the back of this shirt is they keep getting rid of my favorites, Moises Alou, Felipe Alou, Vladimir Guerrero. After the game, the team addressed the fans, and many in the stands cried, knowing that they were really gone. And one of the coaches actually spoke to the fans in French, and the gentleman who was sitting next to me, his English was not great, but he spoke French, and he was crying like his uncle died. It was a pretty sad scene to watch him. He was very upset about that. After the game, fans blame baseball and its owners for the departure. Marvin Matthews, he said, MLB killed this once proud and thriving franchise by alienating all the fans. I'm glad that I now live in Calgary. I won't have to go through the heart-wrenching ordeal face to face. Sadness remained as well, voiced by Harley Kesselman. This is one of the saddest days of my life. There's not going to be baseball anymore in Montreal. And former pitcher, New Brunswick's own Real Cormier, he said, I've been an Expos fan since I was a kid. It was great then. It's sad to see where it is now. And like I said, they are still sort of romanticized and glamorized after their departure. I think a lot of people just like the logo. I think the logo is really a lot of what drew people in. The uniforms, maybe the teams with Tim Raines and Gary Carter, and then later with Vladimir Guerrero. But the at the time, the Expos attendance was not great, and for them, from a business standpoint, it kind of actually made sense for them to leave the city. Then we come to the most recent and final one to date, in terms of team relocations. It's the A's moving from Oakland to West Sacramento. I know that it's officially listed as Sacramento, even though they don't want to be called the Sacramento Athletics or anything of that nature, but they do play in West Sacramento. So that's why in this section I just called it that, just to be correct. But there have been 30 years of rumors of relocation and failed ballpark efforts. And they said they would move to Vegas for the 2028 season after playing 3 seasons in West Sacramento until the new stadium was built. But 2024, definitely their last season there. And like Bill Veeck, Bob Short, and Charles Finley, John Fisher, he was vilified by the fans. The A's fans did try to keep the team, much like in Philadelphia. In 2011, there were relocation rumors then. Fans and local businesses organized a rally to keep the team and gave away shirts that read, Stay. In 2023, MLB granted them permission to pursue parallel paths, and Stay was replaced on shirts that read, Sell. Prior to a game, fans threw tomatoes at pictures of Fisher, team president Dave Cavall, and MLB commissioner Rob Manfred. Fans also staged a reverse boycott where they packed the Oakland Coliseum to show that they were still there. They wore the Sell shirts to other ballparks to draw attention to their plights, and had even more parking lot protests. Chants of sell the team and, pardon my French, fuck John Fisher were often heard. And I can vouch for the fact that at the last game, I was at the last A's game in Oakland, and fuck John Fisher was a very, very common refrain that you would hear throughout the concourses. When I was online actually to go in, my wife and I were standing there, and there was a gentleman talking to another gentleman in front of him. Didn't get their names, but they were talking about, well, maybe Oakland will get another team. Maybe it'll be a team that relocates or an expansion team. And one guy summed it up perfectly with this analogy. He said, it's like your grandma always makes this excellent meal. You love going to her house and having it. One day you realize it will be the last time you ever eat that meal. Sure, you may get the recipe after she's gone, but it will never be the same. And then after the last out, fans hung around, tried to collect dirt from the field, tried to get autographs, just didn't want to leave. It seemed like they knew that the writing was on the wall. I don't think I'm going to do a follow-up segment from when they moved to West Sacramento to Los Angeles or to Las Vegas because based on the interest level in Sacramento, I don't think a lot of people even know they're there currently. So I don't think there's going to be a big big heartbreak when they leave for Vegas. And will there be other teams that relocate? Maybe. And then I'll have to reassess it. But for now, that brings us to the Giants and how you can see how they will be different than everybody else. Rumors popped up of a relocation first to Minneapolis in 1956. But if you talk to Jamie Rupert, she said the rumors were probably earlier than that. Her grandfather was thinking of moving the team to Minneapolis possibly as early as 51, but it didn't materialize until they moved to San Francisco in 58, as you know. And fans, even back then, when the rumors popped up of moving to Minneapolis, they vowed to stick with the team. Frida Axler, she said, I love the Giants. No matter where they play, they'll always be the Giants to me. Pop Florio, who was an usher at the Polo Grounds, he said, I've always been rooting for the Giants since Muggsy McGraw's time. You can't give up rooting for a team like you can give up coffee. One reason I'm an usher is to see the Giants play. I could earn more money, but I love the Giants more than money, which is a fantastic quote. The prospect of the team actually leaving became reality. The final home game, like I said, it got a little contentious. Fans stormed the field after the game and they chanted angrily at Stoneham, We want Stoneham with a rope around his neck. We want Stoneham with a rope around his neck. Hang Stoneham. Others held a sign saying stay team stay, including New York Giants Preservation Society member Carmine Magazzino. He held up one of the ends of the sign. And when I spoke to him, he said he didn't have any intention of holding the sign. Someone just told him when he was at the game, here, hold this. And he held the sign and it became a fairly famous picture. And he didn't actually know it was a picture until he went to the Hall of Fame years later with his wife and he saw himself holding the sign saying, stay, team, stay. And then Giant fans remain loyal to the team after the move, unlike some other markets, which we've discussed. Willie Mays, when I spoke to him, noted as much when he said the Giants were just as popular when we played in New York. People from New York came to Philadelphia to see the Giants play the Phillies. A lot of people from New York came down on the train. And like I said, Steve Rothschild, he gave me the title of this presentation. And the reason he said we lost them, but we still had them was in reference to the recreations of Les Kiter on WINS radio. He would recreate the games. He would use my understanding is from reading up on it, he would use a ticker tape and he had sound effects and it made it feel like it was a live event going on. And he would do the recreations of the game. I tried to find audio recordings of it and I couldn't really find very many good ones, but they do exist. I don't know if they're up on YouTube, but I'll do a better job trying to find those. And even this group shows that the loyalty and the thriving community of Giants fans. You can see what happens with how the Giants brought the trophy back to New York. I mean, that's unheard of. The Dodgers did not do that going to Brooklyn. You didn't see the Minnesota Twins bringing their two championships back to Washington, D.C. It's a unique phenomenon that the Giants have and the connection they still have to their fans in New York. And Gary, in his book, Baseball from 3,000 Miles Away, The Trials, Tribulations, and Triumphs of Being an East Coast San Francisco Giants Fan, available now on Amazon. He laid out the struggle of being a Giants fan left behind and have to deal with that in one way or another. And basically, the Giants were unique amongst every other team I've covered in this. Even before the move was announced, they said they were going to stick with the team. And that was unique. No real other team did that. It's an interesting phenomenon. Nothing was going to change the fact that they were Giant fans. But not, there was anger, but it wasn't to the level of teams like the Browns, the A's twice, the Senators twice, the Braves, and even the Pilots. And there wasn't apathy like with the A's or the Braves, especially in Philadelphia. Giant fans didn't swear off baseball for the most part, unlike Dodger fans, and continued to support the team from afar, whether it be listening to recreations on wins, traveling to Philadelphia to see Willie Mays and company, and helping bring tours of the team's trophies to New York, and of course, by being part of groups like the New York Giants Preservation Society. And that's that.
John, that was great. Really good.
I'm glad everybody enjoyed it.
So I'm gonna start with some comments and then a couple questions. I love how you use the average fans quotes. I think that was great instead of hearing politicians, because so many people here could comment about the Giants leaving who are actually here. And I think that's far more important than a politician saying, oh, nobody, like Horace Stoneham, where were your fathers kind of a thing,
Mm-hmm.
So, um, And
To
you
me, that's
must
the
have.
most interesting part of it because the I liked to see what they thought. It's sort of they're the ones forgotten, and whenever a team relocates, you hear from the teams, you hear from the cities, you don't really hear from the fans left behind. So that's kind of why I wanted to do something like this.
And did you speak to Mars prior to this? You made a comment about Finley not having the fireworks, which really set him off, and that's right out of Mars's joke book there. So I thought maybe you might have spoken to him before that.
No, 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 I did not. No.
Okay.
Yeah.
Uh, then I got two quick other ones. In
Okay.
your opinion, which move was the most unfair?
The most unfair? That's a good question. It might be the Oakland A's because they tried for 30 years to get something done, and the city and the team just were dragging their feet. The Dodgers is also a good one because of the fact that instead of saying, well, if we move to Queens, we couldn't be the Brooklyn Dodgers. So you move to Los Angeles? Okay. That one seems to be a gut punch to the fans. In hindsight, the Expos are remembered fondly. The Pilots never really had a fair chance, but overall, yeah, those are probably the four ones that are top of my list.
And you did this, and I've seen some other people, do relocations. Do you ever think of maybe doing it in the reverse order, as far as the receiving team? How
See, I
San how
did.
San Francisco was excited to get the Giants, how Milwaukee was excited to get the Brewers. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do. And I did think about that, but I think generally it's going to be a similar reaction across the board that I think the new market is going to be excited.
Okay, wonderful,
Generally, I
John.
mean, it's not always the case, but there's very few instances where a city will get a team and be like, we don't want this.
And I think Don or George, somebody, it went by really fast, mentioned that if you haven't seen that Netflix video on the Expos, it's fabulous. So,
It is. It is a very
Mar-
good documentary.
Mars, you're up.
Oh, well, thank you, John. That was interesting. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, I think, including Sacramento, I think the A's have moved more times than any other team. And here's a prediction. Obviously, if they stayed in Oakland with Fisher, who's not a baseball man, he's old Navy from his father, um, realize that if he sold the team while they were still in Oakland, he would get probably a penny on a dollar. With a new stadium, I don't think they're going to draw because there's 81 home games. They'll draw for football with the Raiders because there's only 8 or 9 home games. They'll draw for hockey. It's indoors and air conditioned. This new ballpark in Vegas is going to be open ended in center field because they only have 9 acres. From, I guess it was the former Flamenco Hotel,
Canada.
and they needed 12 acres to have a fully enclosed dome. Now, if you're a tourist coming from either Canada or any other American city, and your hockey team is playing, you may go. If your football team is playing, you may go. But given a choice, would you rather go, let's say, take day and night games? In the daytime, you could gamble. Or would you rather go to a baseball game? Uh, or at night, would you rather go to a show in a casino or a baseball game? They are not going to draw. And after a few years, because the team is worth so much money in a new ballpark, he's going to make millions, if not billions. He's going to sell that team within 5 years of that Vegas move. What do you
I
think
think you're
about that?
right. No, I think you're right. It's interesting too. You bring up the other teams in Vegas because the Golden Knights are an odd exception to a rule. They had success right out of the gate. They went to the Stanley Cup final their first year and also ingrained themselves into the community, not only as an expansion team, but then there was the shooting at the country music concert. And the Golden Knights sort of integrated themselves into that and helped out the community rebuild. And they sort of engendered goodwill. The Raiders, it's football. It's going to draw. There's going to be a full house. Are they all Raider fans? Probably not. But the stadium is going to be full. Baseball's an interesting case. You're right. It's going to be a bit of a problem when on a Tuesday night, the Royals are in town and it's two last place teams going nowhere. I do, to some extent, blame Fisher for the team leaving Oakland, but it's not just Fisher because, like I said, it had been 30 years of trying to get a stadium built. There had been multiple ownership groups that had tried to get a stadium built. Nobody could get anything done. The city put a lot of hurdles in the way. The team walked away from several projects that were promising, and it was not a good situation or a viable situation. And if Oakland was a viable market, the Raiders and the Warriors would have stayed there too. So I don't
Well,
think.
another interesting point is uh, there are probably members of our club that don't agree with this statement. I really don't believe the Bay Area is a two-team market because
Mhm,
when the A's moved here in '68, they both Giants went from 1.5, 2 million or close to 2 million, and they both drew 800,000. So
mhm,
into even back then, that's losing money.
mhm.
So
Well,
I never go ahead.
Rob Manfred agrees with you. He doesn't think that the Bay Area is a two-team market.
Well, with the Giants leaving New York, it always amazes me. I was a New York Giant baseball fan. They left when I was 10. Uh, it always amazed me that, well, I believe O'Malley should have taken Flushing Meadow. Uh, Stoneham was offered a couple of sites, but with the biggest market for any sport, New York City, how could you leave the biggest market without delving into if the football and Giants and Jets moved to New Jersey to talk to the mayors and governors of New Jersey to build a stadium there because even Steinbrenner was threatening to move to New Jersey. Never thought of that. What about actually building a new ballpark on the Polo Grounds site? That could have been. I think they had the land already. You know, so all this flew by. I don't think that Stoneham had the business acumen as O'Malley.
Probably fair. But one thing also that I've discovered is the city of New York presented a plan where they would basically buy the Giants and they would move them into Flushing Meadows, with the plan ultimately being for all three teams to share that stadium in Flushing Meadows. That would have been a disaster of epic proportions. And basically, the Yankees would have told them, kick rocks. We're not moving there. We're successful in the Bronx. Why are we moving there? No. So the plan would have fallen apart anyway. But but the couldn't have rebuilt on the Polo Grounds. The when they took the land, when the city took it over, that and Ebbets they were really wanting to get apartment complexes in there. That was the goal from jump. And the Polo Grounds itself was a small plot of land, and there was no parking. So it would be very difficult in that day and age to have put a stadium in that spot. Plus, the traffic would have been bad, would have been far worse as traffic just got worse with more people getting cars. Um,
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks,
you,
Marty.
John.
sure.
Paul, you're up, Paul.
Yeah, John, thank you. I've been thinking about what you said about the Giants, that, the Giants had a relatively strong following even when they left New York and went to San Francisco. So my question is, and see if you what you think of this. The teams that you mentioned that moved were, for the most part, either like Brooklyn, tied very much to a one very, unique area for people to live in and go to go to their games. But the other teams, like you mentioned, California, you mentioned Oakland, you mentioned Milwaukee, with the exception, most of the times those teams were relatively weak. And so that may be why they didn't have the strong, enduring legacy that the Giants did. And made the difference about why fans stayed with the Giants even when they left New York. What do you think?
No, that's interesting. And the Giants were not that far removed from a championship. The Dodgers were obviously had won a championship the year after. But
Right.
the Brewers had, I mean, I'm sorry, the Braves had won championships relatively recently before they moved. It was within a decade.
Yeah.
And So, but the fact that they just left them with a $10 million bill for a stadium, and the fact that they just feel like the team abandoned them, that's a lot of what happened with some of the places where teams were more successful than others. They felt that they were basically shown a gilded path, and it turned out that it was not to be the case. It was money and politics get in the way of things like this, and fans were not happy with it, especially Milwaukee for that example in particular.
Yeah.
But you're right. Most of the other time,
Milwaukee may
teams
may
were
be
bad.
the exception, but teams like even the A's in Philadelphia, when you think about that, and I think more fits that kind of like weak team. There wasn't the fan base to really draw after a while. I mean,
Well,
because
it makes
Philadelphia,
sense. I mean, if the team
I
is
mean,
bad, the attendance is going to be
right,
poor. And one sort of outlier in that, if they ever move, is Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay has terrible attendance, but
right,
they've been generally pretty good since
right,
2008, but just
yeah,
cannot get a stadium built. They may be making some inroads now at Hillsborough Community College, but until the shovel's in the ground, I'm not going to believe it.
yeah, and it's Florida. Florida's different weather-wise in the summer. How many
Well,
people
and
go to a ball game in Florida in the summer?
That's true. And I mean, look what happened with the Marlins in the city of Miami, how they kind of fleeced the city into building them a white elephant.
Yeah, right. Thank you,
Thanks,
John,
Paul.
very much.
Mhm.
Willie, you're up.
Thank you. John, thank you for your presentation. I enjoyed it very much. And I have two
Thank you.
questions for you. The first one is, do you know of any particular reason why the Cubs and the White Sox never relocated while all the other four cities had teams that relocated?
Um, I think it's just the fact that the Cubs had been so integrated into that neighborhood since Wrigley was built. They moved before that. They were not actually the first team to play at Wrigley. It was the Federal League team, the Chicago Whales. They were the first team. And the Cubs played at much smaller ballparks, and the money of Wrigley kind of kept them there. The White Sox played at quite a few different ballparks, and even now are still looking to get out of whatever that stadium is called now, Rate Field. Um,
Guaranteed rate feel, I think.
no, it's not guaranteed rate anymore. I think they
Oh,
get dropped
okay.
guaranteed. It's just rate. It's
Okay.
very confusing.
Okay.
But they're trying to get a stadium built on the what is it called? It's a section of Chicago. It would be like the 78. I think it's that's the section because it would be the 78th neighborhood. But they lost out to the Chicago Fire, the soccer team. So I don't know what the White Sox are going to do. There's a possibility that once Jerry Reinsdorf dies and the ownership is passed to the I forget his name, but they have an agreement to take over when he passes away. They might move. It wouldn't shock me if one of the cities that doesn't get an expansion team in the next round of expansion gets the White Sox. So could that be Orlando? Could that be Nashville? It's possible.
Right. And the other question I have you ever read or know of any information about the last baseball game that was played in the Polo Grounds, October 12th, 1963? It was a charity game for the Hispanic players, and Marichal was there, Cepeda was there, Felipe Alou was there.
Oh,
I've
that's great.
found information, but I've never been able to find any information on that game.
There were a lot of charity games and stuff that were played after the Giants left. And the Jets continued, well, the Titans of New York continued to play there up until they moved to Shea. So the Polo Grounds wasn't gone as soon as, which I'm sure everybody here knows, wasn't gone as soon as the Giants left. It sort of lingered and hosted various events. There were car races, there were Jehovah's Witness meetings, things like that.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Willie. Storm and Norman, you're up.
Hey, John, this is a great presentation. I got a personal question for you first.
Sure.
Did you used to have a long beard
Yes, I did.
and you used to
That
come
was
to
me. Yeah,
meetings?
I did.
Okay.
Yeah, that was me.
Yeah, no, I miss you. I always enjoyed your input at the meetings.
Oh, well, thank you. I appreciate that.
It's good to see
My
you again.
schedule, likewise, it's good to see you as well. Yeah, my schedule just makes it very difficult for me to attend. I actually today I had to make sure there was no breaking news so that I could attend.
Okay. I also wanted to share this. You mentioned Dewey Suriano. I don't know if you can see this, but this is a baseball for the Pacific Coast League, and Dewey Suriano was the president of the league, and so his facsimile signature is on the ball.
That's awesome.
because you'd mentioned him as one of the owners of the Seattle Pilots. But
Mhm.
now back to my question, and that is, I'm a little bit confused about the timing for the Giants and the Dodgers.
Mhm.
My understanding is, and maybe I'm wrong about this, there was an edict from either the league or the commissioner that said they weren't supposed to announce that they were going to move until after the season ended. Yet Horace Stoneham announced it in August, and O'Malley did announce it after the season ended. And so after Stoneham made his announcement, did everyone in Brooklyn just assume the Dodgers were leaving too?
Yes, basically everybody was waiting for the other shoe to drop. It was more of kind of a formality at that point in time. I guess they were still holding out some hope that they would find some last minute solution. But if that happened, I don't know if the Giants would have gone to San Francisco. I feel like they would have gone to Minneapolis. But it was agreed upon by everybody that they were going to move. The Dodgers had agreements with the city. They still were waiting on some things to be finalized. That might have been why he held off announcing it. They had to get the Los Angeles City Council had to approve some measures so they could do eminent domain and take the land and things like that for Dodger Stadium. But the it was basically a formality.
So were the Dodger fans having protests also at the
No,
end of the season?
no. When the final game at Ebbets Field happened, it was not very well attended, and the Dodgers actually had sort of given their fans a little bit of a preview by playing over the course of 2 seasons, 15 games in Jersey City at Roosevelt Stadium. So they had already kind of greased the wheels for them leaving, and I think Dodger fans were angry, but were sort of knew that it was happening.
All right, thanks, John, and great to
Mhm.
see you.
Oh, likewise.
I guess married life makes the beard go away, right, John?
The married life would not have happened if I had the beard and the long hair. Yeah. So,
Brian, you're up. Your wife is lovely, John.
oh, thank you. She liked you as well. She had a good time.
Okay, kind of an answer to John's question. Um, I'm a subscriber to the New York Times, and so I got here the New York Times articles on the final games played by the Dodgers at Ebbets Field and then also the Giants at the Polo Grounds. And what's interesting is that for the Giants, it's a big front page article that extends for columns and columns and columns in the sports pages. For the Dodgers, it's not even the lead article in the sports section.
That's
But
interesting.
in any event, what it says about the Dodgers, the headline is Dodgers defeat Pirates in Ebbets Field finale, is that everybody, and this is a quote from the New York Times, including the 6,202 cash customers, assumed that the Dodgers were playing their final game in the old ball yard that was open 45 years ago. So, in answer to Norm's question, I guess Brooklyn fans kind of understood what was going to happen. Um, the article itself is not very long. It talks about Old Lang Syne being, kind of a nostalgic farewell song played at the end of the game, and then everybody just kind of quietly went their own separate ways. With regard to the Giants, the it's a front page article that reads like an obituary to begin with. It says New York Giants, 1883 to 1957. And then it talks about souvenir hunting following the baseball club, ripping up the Polo Grounds after the team is defeated there in its final game. Um, I can maybe forward these articles to Gary, perhaps. I don't know whether anyone would actually be able to pick them up without being a subscriber to the New York Times. But one of the interesting things about it is one fan was quoted as being very, very disappointed that Willie Mays didn't get a hit in his last at bat at the Polo Grounds. And in fact, the Giants, who made the last three outs as the team went down quietly in the bottom of the ninth, were Don Mueller, Mays, and then Dusty Rhodes had the honor of making the final out.
As have you seen Mo Resner's documentary about the last game?
Can't say that I have, no.
Very good. Mo was a member of the Giants Preservation Society, and he was there. He had an 8 millimeter. There it is. Gary is holding it up. And he had an 8 millimeter camera. He just happened to have a video camera with him that day, and he took video. And it's really an interesting thing. If you get a
So,
chance, check that out.
so what the Bleacher fans said about Willie Mays was Hilly had Willie gotten the hit, the send-off would have been a success. Now it's a flop. Kind of a sad way, I guess, to depart the Polo Grounds. But the article makes note that they loved Willie Mays. They begged him vainly they begged vainly to see him for one last final time. There was a lot of bitterness towards Stoneham, and as you pointed out, even this article notes that there were it was almost a little song that went, "We want Stoneham, we want Stoneham, we want Stoneham," with a rope around his neck. This is in the New York Times, mind you. I just thought it was kind of really interesting that the Dodgers, who played their final game just a few days at Ebbets Field before the final game in the Polo Grounds, get, in the New York Times at least, hardly any mention at all. Whereas the article in the Giants game is very extensive, even talking about recovering the Eddie Grant plaque.
That is interesting, and I do wonder. I have access to the Times as well, and I can see the Daily News in another manner, but I wonder what the Brooklyn coverage would be with the Brooklyn Eagle, if that was front page news there, because they had their own dailies at the time, so it might have been a little different.
Thank you, Brian. John, you got time for 3 more?
Sure.
Wonderful.
I'm not doing anything.
Tom, you're up.
Okay, so I have a couple quick comments about that last game at the Polo Grounds, the benefit game. I happened to write the Sabre bio for Ed Bauta, who was originally from Cuba. Ed Bauta told me in writing the bio that the game ended 5-2 in favor of the National League team. Roberto Clemente managed the National Leaguers, and Panamanian Hector Lopez managed the American League. The majority of the players were from Cuba. 16 of the players in that game came from Cuba. Even it was post Castro, but that's because the majority of the big leaguers at that time were Cuban. Now, here's what Ed Bauta told me. He was still remorseful about this game 55 years after he pitched the 9th inning. Here's what he told me. I did not pitch well. We were up 5-0 in the 9th. I gave up 2 runs, felt like I lost it for the National League. We wanted to shut the American League out. And then Orlando Cepeda made a quote too. Cepeda said the following: "It didn't matter that it was for charity and that it wasn't a real all-star game. When you put on your uniform, you play hard and tried even harder to win. And that's what everybody did in that game." So I thought I'd, mention that.
No, that's a
Thank
really
you, Tom.
interesting insight. Yeah.
Renee, you're up.
John, great
Renee.
presentation. Loved it. And I missed you. And I mentioned that when I saw you for the
Likewise.
first time in forever, and the beard and all that stuff. So great presentation. Loved it. I really like, because I was going to bring this up, what you mentioned about Robert Moses' plan to put a stadium for 3 teams.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I have a question. There was rumors, I heard rumors of the locations where the Giants were going to move. Okay, so the Dodgers wanted to stay in Brooklyn. I don't care. Fine, stay there. Yankees, Giants couldn't stay in Queens, couldn't go to Queens. What's the timeline when Moses is thinking to do this and all this stuff is happening, with both the Giants and the Dodgers? Can you speak on that?
Yeah, a little bit. The big hang up the Giants had about Queens was the fact that they would no longer own the team. There was one of Bob Moses's representatives, whose last name was actually the same as mine, George V. Mclaughlin. He was sort of instrumental in the whole process, and he went on record saying that the city wanted to own the team and would have them play in Flushing Meadows. And Stoneham, since the team was in his family for so long, didn't want to give up control of the team. So that was part of the reason. they wouldn't also, not only would they not own the team, they wouldn't control the ballpark, and they would have to share it. The sharing was less of a problem because that never really got so far down the road. It was proposed, but it never really went anywhere. And Stoneham himself, actually, when they were testifying in front of Congress in '56, said that he could move into Yankee Stadium or he could move into Baychester, he said, which, if my map is correct, is where Co-op City is now. He
Right.
was talking about building a ballpark in Co-op City, or where Co-op City would be, but before that it was Freedom Land, the amusement park.
Right.
And basically, I think he's the only one who had any knowledge of that because nobody else seemed to know what he was talking about. He may have just pulled that one out of thin air, but I think he also may have been using it as an example of, oh, we have other options where we could go. But that was '56 when he was testifying in front of Congress. He didn't mention Minneapolis. He mentioned staying in the area, specifically Yankee Stadium. He did mention Queens a little bit, but more of it, it's been brought up, not as a we're pursuing it.
There was also mentioned where the Javits Center was.
Oh, that.
Okay, yeah. You got a story on that?
Oh boy. Hulan Jack, who was the borough president of Manhattan, wanted to build a 110,000 seat stadium on stilts with a heliport and a TV center. It didn't go anywhere because it would have been a financial boondoggle, and I don't understand the whole on stilts thing. The only thing I can think is that it would have been like the vessel is right now over Hudson Yards, or it would have been on sort of a platform. But the way it's presented in the newspapers is they said stilts.
That's interesting because it doesn't sound right. But if you remember, this was, I remember when the city was trying to get the Jets to play in Manhattan, and they were going to build, for lack of a phrase you use, stilts over the train yards, and then that stadium would be for the Olympics. But that neighborhood is such a disaster to drive and walk on that it never came to be, thank goodness. But
You know who actually put the kibosh on that? Jim Dolan. He
right.
is
No,
the
no.
one, yeah, because it would take revenue away from Madison Square Garden. He
Right.
fought it, and I
Right.
guess he won.
That's right. Well, thank you. Thank you.
Oh,
Thank you,
anytime.
Renee.
Don't be a stranger, John.
I'll try not to.
Mr. Met, take us home.
Okay, thanks, Gary. John, great presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Greg.
I have a kind of a two-part question, or maybe they're two questions. Number one, coming into 1952 into 53, the Braves being the first team within your purview. We're coming off of 50 years of no teams changing markets. Is it an absolutely bizarre thought in the public sphere that this sort of thing starts happening? And by the time you get to 1957, it feels like fait accompli in New York. Well, everybody else is doing it. We might as well too. I'm just wondering about the idea of Major League Baseball teams changing locales. And my second part is, did you come out of your research with any kind of sympathy for any particular owners? Because we tend to think of, and God knows, I'm not here to, you know, raise the flag for billionaires or millionaires or whatever they were in those days. We always think about the fans, but is there anybody who had really had a case like, oh my God, this poor guy or family that owned a team? You really can't blame them for leaving wherever. So, your thoughts in both of those.
Sure. Yeah. Well, like you said, was more than a 50-year gap actually, because the team that is mentioned as the team that moved before is the 1902 Baltimore Orioles moving to New York to become the Yankees. That's a gray area because they gave back the charter to the American League. The American League always wanted a franchise in New York, and they gave the charter to somebody else. Only 6 players from that Orioles team went to the Highlanders. So it wasn't like the full organization moved. So it's sort of a weird gray area. If you want to go back before that, I want to say the last team to move might have been the Kansas City Cowboys or the Indianapolis Maroons. One of those teams.
Did the Milwaukee, I think, Blues move to Baltimore before
The
Baltimore
the
became New
original
York?
Cardinals, or the current Cardinals actually, used to be the Milwaukee Brewers.
Okay.
And they moved to St. Louis when not not the Anheuser-Busch people, but the ownership group before that, which I can't remember the
Okay.
name of the owner, but he moved them from, and that might have been 1901. I believe it was
Yeah.
1901.
Okay.
And then the second part of your question was about if there's any owners that are somewhat sympathetic, and I'd say yes. Claude Brochu of the Expos, he tried. He tried to get a downtown ballpark built, and it did not happen. There were renderings and everything, and he had trouble getting the TV deals with the English language, especially. That's a big problem. The fact they didn't have an English language TV provider for years.
Right.
And the downtown ballpark, he felt, would have solved a lot of their issues. Olympic Stadium was literally falling apart. There were pieces of it that fell off, and it needed to go, and it needed to go probably back in about 1989, but nothing was done about it, and it continued to crumble. And Olympic Stadium itself was never even supposed to be a permanent venue for
Sure.
them. It was for the Olympics, and the retractable roof never worked. It was supposed to open like when you would open a can of cat food, and it never worked. So it was just a dump.
Wasn't Vec looking to move the Browns to Southern
Yes.
California?
Yes. He was close to moving the Browns to Los Angeles, and there were reports that he was going to make an announcement about it on December 7th, 1941. And as you know, something major happened that day, and it kind of put those plans on ice. I don't know how baseball would have handled that. The fact that there would only be one team on the West Coast at that point in time, and airfare, I mean, flying by plane was not as common as it was by the time 57 and 58 rolled around. It was, I don't know how they would have approached that, but the plans were in motion. They may have even changed their name to the Los Angeles Stars. That's been
It was
talked about.
pre-Bill Veeck. It was not Veeck on LA, and it was a
Okay.
non-starter. The American League had said we can't have just one team all the way out on the
Okay.
West Coast. Travel wouldn't work. But it was Barnes, I think, was his name.
Okay.
Lived in the off season in Beverly Hills. Veeck flirted with LA, but the American League owners had decided they wanted Veeck out and
They
wanted
did.
to go to the group like you had said in Baltimore.
Okay.
They
Well,
forced Vec out basically.
Yeah.
Like you said,
okay.
All right, I
they
got
were
you.
not going to let him move unless he sold the team, and he sold it to a syndicate in Baltimore.
So when it happened, last follow-up, when it finally does happen that Boston moves to Milwaukee, up to that point, was there almost a sense that they can talk about it, they can threaten it, but this is never going to happen. We haven't seen it in more than 50 years. Or was it, well, nobody's, 281,000 or whatever it was showing up at Braves Field the last year. It's like, well, you know, bon voyage.
I don't think it was ever seriously brought up in the interim between the moves. It didn't seem to be an idea that anybody tried to do. I don't know why. It's an interesting dichotomy why nobody even brought it up. I'm sure some of the teams were struggling in that time, but they decided to either find new ownership or tough it out in the city they were in, maybe because of tradition. I don't know necessarily why it was not brought up really until the Braves.
The idea of it being a public trust, which always seems a little highfalutin, in reality, was that actually something, were these guys really sportsmen in their way, even though they
To
were
some
businessmen?
degree, to some degree, and it's because it's not as if there weren't other franchises moving. The Rams moved from Cleveland to Los Angeles in that time, so other sports franchises did move, but just baseball, I guess they just felt the tradition bound them to where they were.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks,
No
Greg.
problem.
Howard, make it quick.
Yeah, I'll make it quick. John, I was just wondering, as part of your research, did you happen to use this book at all, Twilight
Yes,
Themes,
yes,
which I read in the about 25 years ago? Really excellent book.
great book.
And it centered on just 6 teams. You did a lot more than that tonight, including the Giants. Giants got about 40 pages. Well, they all got about 40 pages, but excellent book. I was just wondering, I assume you probably did use it.
Yes,
And then let me make just a couple of very fast comments. You mentioned the Expos just now. I went to 2 Expo games. One was in the early 70s when I was a college student in upstate New York, and Jarry Park was practically empty. But in all fairness, it was April weather,
Mm,
pretty cold. Then my family and I went to a game at Olympic Stadium against the Mets. It was an afternoon game in one of the last years that Olympic Stadium was open. and the place was almost empty. It was a nice afternoon game. I didn't know about it falling apart. Maybe it wasn't falling apart then, but the place was empty. And it was an ugly stadium to begin with. It was not, as you said, a baseball stadium. And one last note, since it concerns the Bay Area, I went to an Oakland A game in 1974, I believe it was, when they were still world champions. I went with a friend of mine from home, from New York, and it was a beautiful afternoon game, midweek game. The place was virtually empty. And this was when they were world champions. I mean, they still had Reggie, they still had Catfish. Maybe Catfish was gone to the Yankees by then, I don't remember. So I know how bad things got in Oakland near the end, but as long ago as the 1970s, when they were still reigning world champions, the place was still empty. We sat upstairs in the upper deck, and we eventually moved all the way down to practically, field level. So there was always a problem. I believe the Bay Area situation, that somebody mentioned earlier, the Giants in Oakland, I mean, it's a miracle they lasted all those years together. Because to me, the Bay Area, it's a great town. I love San Francisco. My daughter lives out there, but it just wasn't a two-team town for baseball.
I can just add on to what you said there. Going back to the 70s, before Charlie Finley sold to the Haas family, he was talking about relocating the A's back then. So it's not a new phenomenon, and it does tie into the fact that the attendance was pretty lousy at the Coliseum. He also thought the Coliseum was a poor facility, and he flirted with other cities, including Denver.
Thank you, Howard. John, before we thank you, just tell everybody what you're working on as far as how the Dodgers are remembered versus how the Giants are remembered.
I'm working on 3 things. Thank you, Gary. I don't know how close I am to getting any of it published, but it's a labor of love, I guess, in that sense. One, like you mentioned, is sort of how the Dodgers are seemingly, and obviously this group differs, but seemingly remembered more fondly than the Dodgers. And that kind of ties into, I was watching baseball, and Ken Burns focused heavily on the Dodgers move and didn't mention the Giants at all. And I asked him about that, and he said it was because 2 reasons. He was a Dodger fan, and he admitted, well, no, he was a Red Sox fan. So that's what it was. He focused on the Red Sox and the Dodgers because they were the first team to integrate and the last team to integrate. And that's why it was no disrespect to the Giants, he said, but he focused on the Dodgers because of their role in integration. And another project that I'm working on is about my experiences going to baseball stadiums. I've been to 55 of them, and it should go up to 57 this year if everything goes right. And that's for regular season and postseason games. And then the third project is going to be about every venue that has hosted professional sports in the 4 major sports leagues. I'm documenting them. I'm saying where they were, taking pictures of them. It's a bit of an endeavor, and it's going to be more like an encyclopedia, but I feel like it could be something that would be a valuable resource to people down the road.
Wonderful. Well, I got to tell you, tonight was great. So I'll give it up for John Mclaughlin.
Oh, thank you, everybody.
Great seeing you.
Likewise.
As much as the video might have helped, we didn't need it. You were terrific. So.
Oh, well, I'm glad. Okay, I'm glad it.
Really.
If you want, I could send you the PowerPoint and you could show everybody the slides. But
be fine. That'd be great. Anyway,
okay.
We will reconvene in 2 weeks with Ken Davidoff. Anyway, until then, have a great weekend, and we'll see you. And be well. I'm going to stop the recording, and then we'll talk Giant stuff if anybody wants to. Have a good night, everybody. John, thanks again. Great.
No problem. Thank you.